Welcome to the ODDSBREAKER'S, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
My friends, welcome back to podcast 34 of 2020. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us at the ODDSBREAKERS and follow us on social media / the ODDSBREAKERS. This episode is being brought to you by mybookie.ag for a 50% bonus. Please visit MyBookie and use the promo code the ODDSBREAKERS. Terms and conditions apply. And location. If you'd like to help us out with our costs, sponsor the podcast and the website, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. For $17.99 a month, you can get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. If nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. If you are listening to this podcast, I recorded it a week early because I am hopefully on vacation, depending on how everything goes here, and fishing in the North Woods, but we can still talk about college football because that's not scheduled to start until late August, early September. Big 12, little Big 12 action, little Big 12 preview is what we're going to discuss today. Excited about that. Worked pretty hard on it. It's not going to be quite as in-depth as the Big Ten because I specialize in the Big Ten, but it's going to have some very good information here. Their record from last year, their power rating this year, key transitions, returning production, recruiting rankings, net yards per play, turnover margin, schedule, kind of things like that, and their season win total number, of course. So we get into the important stuff when it comes into projecting a football season. So obviously, before we get into that, Major League Baseball has imposed their right to a season, which is the way they didn't want to do it, but they are imposing 60 games on the players' union for the deal they made in March in order for the players to get some of their pay. So it looks like the players are going to have to play some games. They already got paid for some, so their pay is not going to be great anymore because they already made some of that money. And they're going to have to play 60 games disgruntled because they didn't get, the deal they wanted. Neither did Major League Baseball. They wanted more games, and that obviously fell through, So there's some pros and cons to this, I suppose. Well, the ultimate con is the fact that there's just not that many games, and the season is starting so late. July 23rd-ish is the earliest I'm seeing that it's going to start, which kind of almost gets us right into preseason football. So I think Major League Baseball is going to be capped for a little while, and then it's probably going to be ignored, which you wonder how much the fans are going to ignore it. Baseball is the pastime where you go to a game more than it's more enjoyable to me anyway than watching it on TV, and they're going to miss out on a lot of that. So I really wonder about the future of the sport, if it's going to drop down even lower after all these petty negotiations between the union and the owners. It's just a strange thing. A good thing that might happen with the 60-game season is you might not see some of these teams tank before the month of August. So that's awesome. When there's less games, you are in it and you have a shot in baseball because even the worst teams, win 33% of their games. So they might decide not to throw in the towel until pretty late in October or maybe late September. I think it's supposed to end September 28th or early October. I can't remember the exact date. So that's actually a good thing. Not seeing tanking. Imagine that concept, huh? So I'm curious to see how it all plays through. A lot of people are going to be like, oh, the players aren't going to be that motivated. I disagree with that. I think the players are going to be motivated because players play. And then, they might have disagreements in the union. That's not necessarily what the players are thinking themselves. It's kind of like when you hire an agent to do your contract, all this crap comes out in the media, but it's just like you're thinking to yourself, that's not me. That's my agent doing that. He's doing what's best for me. I just want to play ball. So I kind of think that the players are going to try, and you should by mid-September or so get a pretty good, mid-August or so, get a pretty quality product, I would think, out on the field. Some interesting rules that they have. They're going to have inning 10 for tie games start with somebody on second, so the game ends quicker. I found that interesting. They're going to have the normal 10-team playoffs as they had before. So 2 wild cards. There'll probably be the wild card game. And then the other 3 division winners are in the playoffs of the American League and the National League. So that's going to be normal. And it looks like players are going to have to report on July 1st for a little bit of spring training, probably done in their home city, in their home park. So that's interesting. I think that a lot of people are against this whole player on second deal. It's probably more experimental for next season, but I guess why not throw it out there and just to see what it's going to look like. I guess it's the guy that got out, the last out from the inning before is going to go on second, and if he scores, the pitcher is not going to be scored an earned run against him. It's going to be scored like as an error. So that's kind of interesting on how they're going to do it statistic-wise. Why punish the pitcher when it wasn't even the pitcher that put him on base? The players are going to get a full prorated salary, so at least they should be happy about that. It's not like they're not making the money from their games. They say 60 games is 30% of their salary, 37%. I don't understand that quite. Maybe it's because of some preseason and things like that. So that's fine. I suppose the owners are going to take a little bit of a hit for that, but you just wonder if this is going to make their 2021 contract negotiations even worse. I have to wonder if the fact that the union didn't get their way and they got a season imposed on them is going to dirty up the negotiations and possibly make the union sit out on the sidelines for a little bit more. Now, there's still a few more things to be worked out. There's a border shutdown with Canada still for some of the Canadian teams. There's some spikes in some states, Florida, Arizona, and you wonder if they're going to play there if the virus is looking bad. It seems like a lot of athletes are getting it, if you've read the news lately anyway, and they don't seem to be getting it too bad. So I guess that's a good thing. Even though cases are going up, they're doing a lot more testing, and some of our athletes are not really showing too bad of symptoms. So hopefully that shows that we can manage this virus and we can all get through it. All right, without further ado, let's get into some Big 12 conference preview. And I always find the Big 12 very amazing to me, being that at least the past 5 years or so, there's been 2 teams who were the outliers at the top and bottom of the conference, right? Everyone else in the Big 12 was kind of as good as each other. They're just kind of mixed in. And they're always pretty much upsetting each other in certain situations. Hard to predict sometimes. You'll see a Kansas State beat an Iowa State. You'll see an Oklahoma State beat like a Texas or a West Virginia. West Virginia would come in and beat a couple of those teams. They've been beating each other up for the past 5 years, while Oklahoma's kind of been sitting on top, and Kansas has been sitting on the bottom. I find that just so interesting, but it makes the Big 12, I suppose, more interesting to watch. You kind of want the top team to fall eventually, someone else to replace that top team. Can it happen this year? We will see. And you always wonder about poor little Kansas down there, who has a coach in Les Miles, who has won some championships. Well, let's get started right away with Oklahoma. They are on the top, obviously, of the Big 12 for the last 5 years. Like I just stated, I have them power rated this year at 17.5 points better than the average team. I think they're somewhere in the top 8, possibly top 9 in my rankings, in my power ratings. I'll actually tell you right now where they are. Number 9 after Penn State and before LSU. So their 2019 record was 12-2. As we all know, they went to the playoffs and got their butts kicked again. Key transitions in this team, Jalen Hurts and CeeDee Lamb, went to the NFL. Their returning production ranks 82nd. Offense, they returned 49%. On defense, they returned 70%. It's pretty good on D, 70%. What I do like is they return a ton of offensive line production. So that's great. They return the running backs, Kennedy Brooks and Jarrett Hall. That's good. So, the biggest question, right, is Spencer Rattler. We'll see what happens with him. Recruiting rankings, 2017, they ranked 8th. 2018, they ranked 9th. In 2019, they ranked 6th. So those are the 3 years I'd like to go by, if you remember, because some of the 2017 people will be seniors, maybe a few of them left for the draft, but the 18 and 19, the kids are kind of grown up. You can go by 2020 if you want, but it's just, most of those kids are not going to play yet, so I don't. They're recruiting top 8 over the last 3 years. You got to love that. Their net yards per play last year was huge, 2.33 net. So it's just that Lincoln Riley offense, right? Just fantastic. Turnover margin. This shocked me a little bit, looking at this turnover margin. -8. They still went 12-2 and were -8 in turnover margin. Possibly showed when it hit the playoffs a little bit. Horrible. That's horrible. All right? Horrible. That needs to improve, and I think it will. Lincoln Riley is just that good of a coach. Schedule, medium hard. Their tough away games are at Iowa State, at TCU. The Texas game is always the Red River rivalry on a neutral field. But the Tennessee game, they get Tennessee for their non-conference, one of them. That's not going to be a cakewalk. They're going to play Army. Tennessee's just the tougher, obviously going to be tougher this year, according to the speculation. Their season win total is 10. So this is what I wrote down. Lots of question marks, being that they have a new quarterback as usual. But look at how Lincoln Riley's developed new quarterbacks. So I'm pretty confident in Spencer Rattler, I suppose. He is a 5-star recruit out of Phoenix Pinnacle High School and expected to do some big things in this offense. So he didn't have a lot of playing time behind Jalen Hurts, though. So we'll see if that matters. The defense should improve here, returning 70-cent production. I like that. I trust Lincoln Riley. Top 8 recruiting classes. It's looking pretty good here so far. So the thing is that when I count the wins in this Big 12, my number is 9.5. All right. It's 9.5 because I think they could easily lose to Iowa State. I think they could lose to Texas, so there's 10 wins, and I think they could have a hiccup across the board, right? There's a couple other tricky ones out there, like this at TCU, Tennessee, so it's not going to be a play for me. We're going to go with a very small lean to the under, just because we have so many questions about the new quarterback coming in. Number 2, I have, the Texas Longhorns, and they have just been overhyped for years. Maybe it's their year this year. I mean, there's no value on them from a futures perspective. If you look at Texas to win the Big 12, they're plus 300, only 3-1, while Oklahoma's minus 110. Like a normal bet would never touch that. So they're going to come in with some hype again. Their last year's record was 8-5. Key transitions, Devin Duvernay to the NFL, but they have 2 new coordinators, offensive and defensive, and Chris Ash, and he was a good defensive coordinator for a few teams, and Mike Yurcich. So returning production, I like it. I mean, ranked 21st. Offense was 66%, defense 82%. Not usually Texas-like. It's usually more in the middle. Recruiting, top 20 over the last 3 years. 2017 was 25th, 18 was 3rd, and 19th. 2019 was 3rd. So really good recruiting in some of those years. I probably shouldn't even said top 20, more like top 3 the last 2 years. In 1 year, they had 25th. So there you go. Net yards per play, bad. 0.26 net. Oh, this is because their defense was so bad last year. It's not like their offense was great, but that's not good. That needs to improve a ton. And that's why I think they have new coordinators there, is because of that ugly net yards per play. Turnover margin +6. That's pretty good. They probably won't regress, being that they have consistency at quarterback. Their schedule is medium hard. All right. Medium hard. Because at LSU, the second game of the season is going to tell you everything that you need to know about the future of this team. Their Vegas win total is 9. My summary, I wrote make or break. This has to be the year that Texas overtakes Oklahoma. 2 new offensive and defensive coordinators coming in. You can see that Tom Herman, he's not messing around this year. Chris Ash, very successful on defense before becoming the head coach of, unfortunately, Rutgers. And you know how that story goes. He helped the Badgers to 2 Rose Bowls, 2010 and 2012. And through 2012, I wrote. And he's a big part of Ohio State's 2014 title. So lots of experience there. Mike Yurcich was a quarterback coach and passing coordinator at Ohio State last year, as well as an offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State 5 years before that. So in Oklahoma State always had that pretty good offense. That shows some great experience calling plays. So like the coordinators coming in, Sam Ehlinger returns to the helm for Texas. Most of the offensive line and running backs are returning. The Longhorns lost a few, like I said, Devin Duvernay and Colin Johnson at wide receiver. But guys like Brennan Eagles and Alvante Woodard, they should step right in. I love the fact that we're returning 82% of their defense. They need to get past LSU here. That's what they need to do. And LSU is going to have a new-looking team without Joe Brady at offensive coordinator, without Joe Burrow at quarterback. They're getting them early. That's good. This is their chance. Good returning production. But my number is the same as Oklahoma's. It's 9.5. So I lean to the over since Vegas's number was 9. But I just wonder if this is Sam Ehlinger's year to bring this team where it really needs to be, because I really like Sam Ehlinger. Next team I have, and ranked 3rd in the Big Ten, is the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Power rating 9.75. 9.75 points better than the average team 2019 record 8-5. Key transitions, they didn't really lose anybody. Like in that. Returning production ranks 9th in the nation. 9th. That's good. They returned 75% of their offense and 86% of their defense. Recruiting in the 30s over the last 3 years. Average. 2017 was 34th. 2018 was 38th. And 2019 was 34th. So average about 35-ish. Like in that. 2019 net yards per play, 0.6. It's kind of meh. It's pretty good. I mean, for an 8-5 record, I expect it about 0.6. Turnover margin was -1. I think that should improve. Consistency at quarterback. Their schedule is medium. Their non-conference is actually pretty easy, and they do get Texas at home. Let's take a look at their non-conference. Oregon State at home. That should be a win. Tulsa at home. That should be a win. Western Illinois at home. For sure a win. So I like that. So their future is 4-1 to win the Big 12. I don't like that. I mean, what is a team like Oklahoma State that hasn't scratched the surface of winning the Big 12 in so long being 4-1? Which tells me that there's a lot of hype on this team. So their season win total from Vegas is 8.5, and this is what I wrote down. Great returning production, ranking 9th in the nation. So loving that. New offensive coordinator in Casey Dunn, but that shouldn't affect much in my opinion. It really shouldn't, because Mike Gundy's the guy there. He's the one in charge. So Spencer Sanders returning at quarterback is very nice for this team. Very nice. And it's going to help them be dangerous in 2020. But to be honest with you, he needs to improve a lot. He was only 16 for 11 touchdown to interception ratio, and he only threw for 2,065 passing yards. And I think he played most of the season too. Okay? I think he played most of the games. So your numbers should be better than that on an Oklahoma State type defense. He played 11 games. 62.8 passing completion percentage, 2,065 yards. Yeah, that needs to improve if there's going to be hype on this team. I'm not so sure it can happen, but they're pretty hyped. I got this team at 8.5 wins also, so not really nothing there for the season win total. I liked how they showed well against top opponents last year. They never really got blown out, and I think they did lose by double digits to Oklahoma, but they were pretty much in every single game. Chuba Hubbard led the league last year in rushing yards at 2,098. I expect another great year out of him. The Pokes, they're going to be able to score with anybody. The big question is their defense going to continue to improve? So I do like the fact that they return 86% of their defense. So this is kind of the hyped team. This is like the Michigan Wolverines of the Big Ten. So preseason hype. I'm not saying they're going to fail miserably like Harbaugh. I'm saying that a lot of people are on them, and they have some serious upside. But at the same time, they can come crashing down and burn, and I really do not like the price on their future. The next team I have is the Iowa State Cyclones. And this team also has a little bit of sharp hype to them. And I have to say that I agree with it. My power rating is 9.5, so very close to Oklahoma State's. All right. Their 2019 record was 7-6. Wow, only 7-6. I did fade them in their bowl game versus Notre Dame. I was one of the few people that did that. And it ended up turning up. But I also kind of like them coming into this year. All right. Just because I faded them a little bit last year doesn't mean I won't like them coming into this year. I don't think they really lost anybody. I don't think they even had anybody drafted. I'm pretty sure they didn't. 2019 returning production ranked 52nd. Not great, not terrible. 62% on offense, 73% they return on defense. The recruiting's always been in the 40s and 50s over the last 3 years. 2017, they ranked 57th. 2018, they ranked 55th. And 2019, they ranked 46th. 2019 net yards per play, 1.09. That's pretty dang good for being 7-6. They should have been more like 8-5, 9-4. Something like that with that yards per play. I mean, that was better than Texas by far. That was better than Oklahoma State. Shows me they had some bad luck, and you can see it through their turnover margin, -3. -3 was their turnover margin, and if that gets better, this could be a very good team. Their schedule is medium. Their non-conference is tough as usual because they always play Iowa. Maybe it's their year to beat Iowa. But they get Oklahoma at home, and then they go to Texas. So I like the fact that they get the harder of the teams at home. I really like that. Their season win total is 8. All right. Iowa State returns their main guys this year. Very good thing. Like I said, I thought Matt Campbell is a little overrated in the media, but he did a fine job again. He just did a fine job. If it wasn't for that special teams fumble that we remember versus Iowa, if it wasn't for that boneheaded mistake, they win that game. Oh, Iowa State wins that game if it wasn't for that. Brock Purdy, his passing yards last year, 3,982 with a 27-9 TD to interception ratio. Okay? Lots of people have Iowa State as a sleeper team this year in the Big 12. Lots of bettors that I listen to, that I follow, that I talk to. So it's hard for me to disagree with that looking at their yards per play numbers. It really is. The team lost 2 receivers to graduation, but they returned their main receiver in Tariq Milton. I like that. He was the main guy. Breece Hall did a great job at tailback, leading rusher last year. He's returning. Another tell this team could be good is that none of their seniors were drafted, right? None of them. So that tells me that they kind of lost maybe some leadership there, but they might actually be better at those positions next year. So the fact that none of them were drafted, it's kind of a tell for that. And it's usually a way I don't look at things with teams, but I find it very interesting this year to look at this team like that. So they were able to pull up some good stats last year. My biggest question is the offensive line. They only returned 2 starters. But if that improves and their turnover margin improves, then this is going to be the team that pushes the Sooners all the way to the top spot. My number is 9 wins with some upside. Okay? I have to expect they definitely beat South Dakota at home. Then 50% chance they beat Iowa this year at Iowa, right? So that would be a half a loss. Then they get UNLV at home, that's a win. Texas Tech at home, that's a win. At Kansas, that's a win. At Oklahoma State, there's maybe a half a loss there. So that's 1 loss total. Home against Oklahoma, I'll even call that a loss. Home against Kansas State, win. At TCU, win. Home against Baylor, win. Against Texas, at Texas, I'll call that their 3rd loss. And then at Iowa State, I'll call that a win. Home against West Virginia. That's 3 losses there. And they might beat Texas or Oklahoma this year. So I have a strong lean to the over. But what I do like the most is the future to win the Big 12 is 12-1 right now at some books. While Oklahoma State's at 4-1, Iowa State is at 12-1, and Iowa State had a much better net yards per play than they did last year. That's what we're taking here. We're going to throw a unit on Iowa State to win the Big 12 at 12-1, and you might even be able to hedge that coming into the game if they play the Big 12 championship against Oklahoma or Texas.
Soon as he buy that wine, I just creep up from behind.
For the next team that we're going to look at, at number 5 is the TCU Horned Frogs. Power rating is an 8 points better than the average team. 2019 record 5-7. A little bit of a drop off there. Key transitions. Actually, they had some talent on this team. Jalen Reagor went to the NFL, to the Eagles. Jeff Gladney at cornerback. Ross Blaylock at defensive tackle. Some pretty good players there they had in the draft. Returning production, 64th. Middle, offense 61%, defense 68%. Recruiting about in the late 20s ish over the last 3 years. 2017 was 28th, 2018 was 25th, and 2019 was 31st. 2019 net yards per play, 0.15 positive. That's pretty bad for a TCU Horned Frogs team. Their turnover margin was flat, 0. So kind of medium there. Schedule this year, medium hard. Non-conference is tricky. It is really tricky with SMU and Cal. SMU is a pretty good team if you remember last year. And Cal, I think I'm kind of hot on Cal if you remember that last podcast I had with Marco and Chris. They're going to be tough. And I think that TCU has to go to Cal. So they at least get Oklahoma and Iowa State at home, but they get to go to Texas here. The season win total is 6.5. TCU has a really hard start, like I said, to the schedule. And that's why their season win total isn't like a 7 or 7.5, 6.5. People are seeing kind of what I'm seeing here. They're going to get Prairie View after Cal. Then they get SMU. Like I said, was really good. The Mustangs actually beat the Horned Frogs last year, embarrassed them, if you remember. So it's going to be a revenge spot for TCU. So circle that one. TCU then has to host Oklahoma State the week after that. So not going to be easy either. Quarterback Max Duggan returns with some experience, but at 53% completion percentage. Not sure if that's a great thing. TCU's outlook to me, it really is dependent on the 4 new offensive linemen. They only return one of them, and they have some 5-star running backs. I believe, I think it's DeMarqua Foster is the stud coming in. I really struggled where to put this team in my power ratings this year. I really did. So I kind of had to make them equal to where they were last year, and that was 8. But there's at least 4 teams better than them, I think, in the Big 12. And they're probably going to lose at home to Oklahoma and Iowa State. I have them at 7 wins here. I have them at 7. And it's a small lean to the over. 6.5 is kind of low for a Gary Patterson TCU team, but just not quite enough to get me over the hump. Also, I want to throw in their 5-star recruit was Zach Evans, coming from Houston. He signed with Georgia, then he switched to TCU. So he's going to be possibly a factor this year. It'd be cool to watch him play and gets a good amount of the carries his first year. The next team I have is actually tied with TCU, but I put them at number 6 because they lost a lot of production, and that's the Baylor Bears. Now, you remember Baylor, I had a very nice ticket on them to, it was like a 28-1 to win the Big 12, and we hedged that in the Oklahoma game, so that worked out fine for us. But Baylor power rated the same at 8 this year. 2019 record was 11-3. And that was awesome. Pretty amazing stuff. Key transitions. Denzel Mims to the NFL. Bravion Roy, defensive line to the NFL. And James Lynch, defensive line to the NFL. Returning production. 108th ranking out of 130 teams. Offense was 70%, thanks to their quarterback returning in Charlie Brewer. But defense is only 32%. Recruiting rankings. Not going to find a lot of love there. 2017 was 40th, 2018 was 29th, and 2019 was 35th. Recruiting, average around 35th, I guess.
So you'd average it the 3 years. Net yards per play was an amazing 1.33. That was awesome and huge for this team. But they also had a very easy non-conference last year, and you can attribute some of that. Turnover margin, plus 11. I mean, that was great last year as well. Plus 11 turnover margin. That's got to be in the top 10. But there's going to be some regression there, in my opinion. I think they'll be happy with 5 or 6. So that's a possible reason for some of their successes. Schedule, medium. Non-conference looks easier, but LA Tech, they lost a lot of players, thank goodness, because they were pretty good. They beat Miami in their bowl game, if you remember. And it's too early for Ole Miss and old Mike Leach to be good yet. So I think their non-conference is pretty manageable. Season win total is 7.5. So as you see, at 7.5, I have them higher. I'm higher on TCU than Vegas is. And Vegas is higher on Baylor, a little bit higher than me. I think I have their wins close to the same, but Baylor's schedule is actually easier. Summary. Like I said, Baylor, great job last year, but guess who they lose? They lost their coach. And I probably should have said that under key transitions. Matt Rule went to the NFL. Now, that's a bad thing because I really like Matt Rule and his offense. But the good news is they probably get the best defensive coordinator from football last year, Dave Aranda from LSU. Before that, he was the defensive coordinator of the Badgers, is their new coach. But the returning production, ranking 108th, not loving that so much. I mean, that's really the thing that sticks out to me and why I dropped them in my power ratings. Charlie Brewer he's a gamer, but he's also kind of injury prone. I think they're going to be scoring some points this year. I know their awesome receiver Denzel Mims is gone, but I'm looking to bet overs with this team right now. That's what I'm looking for, to bet some overs until Dave Aranda's team gets their feet under them. And be careful about one thing, though. I'm saying overs, but maybe Dave Aranda is smart enough to slow the game down. Baylor's been known as a fast pace. Maybe he slows it down, and maybe you have to start looking towards the unders. So we're going to have to see how their defense plays game one. That's what I'm going to be looking at, is how their defense plays. So looking at their schedule, I have Baylor's best case scenario at 7.5, which is right at Vegas's number. They're going to beat Kansas. They'll beat Ole Miss, most likely beat Ole Miss at home. They're going to beat Incarnate Ward. They're going to beat LA Tech at home. Then they go to Oklahoma, lose. Texas Tech, maybe loss. Home against TCU, maybe loss. At Texas, probably a loss. Home against Oklahoma State, maybe. At Iowa State, probably a loss. At West Virginia, maybe. And home against Kansas State, probably a win. But 7.5 is the best I can get out of that. For the next 3 teams, they're very interesting to me because all of these teams had new coaches last year. And the new coaches all did pretty well. If you remember, Neil Brown is the coach of West Virginia. He came from Troy, went 5-7 last year with no returning production. Was really good job. Matt Wells at Texas Tech came from Utah State when they were really good. When Love was actually a really good quarterback the year before. They went 4-8 last year, but it was a tough schedule, and his starting quarterback went out in Game 3. And Chris Kleiman came from a Division II school who won a ton of championships in a row in North Dakota State and brought the Kansas State Wildcats to 8-5 last year. Huge performance from them, and a nice bowl appearance against Navy, and almost actually flat out won that game. That was actually a really good game to watch. But out of these 3 teams, I can't wait to see who emerges. And I know I could have said Kansas with Les Miles, but I don't put Kansas in this grouping right now. So I just thought these 3 coaches really were kind of cool to look at. Number 7, I have Texas Tech. The power rating is a 5.5. 2019 record was 4-8. Key transitions, not really any. They're getting their quarterback, who was injured, back. in Alan Bowman. So that's a good thing. Returning production, 81st. Offense was 48% and defense was 71%. Recruiting rankings, 2017 was 49th, 2018 was 72nd, and 2019 was 62nd. So I wonder if some of that was the reason why Cliff Kingsbury, got fired. It makes me wonder that. But at the same time, you have to remember where good old Petty Mahomes came from, right? So recruiting, very average when it comes to a football team, a little below average for the Big 12. 61 is their average the last 3 years. That's not good. Their net yards per play was minus 0.5. Turnover margin was actually plus 4, which was pretty good for this team. Their schedule is actually medium easy. So, that's a very good thing. Their non-conference is at UTEP, home against Alabama State, home against Arizona. I guess Arizona's their tougher one, but Arizona's Arizona, not great or anything. They're going to win a home against Kansas. I mean, they get Oklahoma at home, but that shouldn't matter so much, right? Their other possible wins, I suppose, are hosting Texas at home, maybe at TCU, and probably hosting Baylor at home, but that's the farthest I can really go here. I thought Matt Wells did a good job. That's kind of the point here so far with what he had. A lot of wondering going on with this team. The returning production is a little off, and it is because of Alex Bowman's injury, right? He didn't produce much, and he's going to be their starting quarterback. Another good thing is that the Red Raiders might have the easiest schedule, so I like that. And that's why their season win total is 6. They're projected to make a bowl game. So another thing I like, they return their skill positions, which is very nice on offense. And they have to fill a few holes on defense because Jordan Brooks, you remember, he went to the NFL in the first round, and Broderick Washington at defensive tackle went in the 5th round. But this team could be sneaky good. I really like Matt Wells. So my wins is right in the button at 6, and probably have a little bit of upside there, but not enough for me to make a play. Number 8, the Kansas State Wildcats. Power rating 5.5. Once again, same power rating as Texas Tech. Kansas State key transitions were, they pretty much lost their whole offensive line. So they're going to be playing with a new offensive line. Their 2019 record was 8-5. Their returning production, they put it at 59% on offense, and that's really because the quarterback, Skylar Thompson, is coming back, and their main wide receiver, Malik Knowles. But they only return those 2 guys that are pretty much starters. The rest of them are going to be guys that played a little bit last year but didn't start. I'm concerned about that. Returning production on D was 63%. Recruiting rankings, typical Kansas State, 61st in 2017, 66th in 2018, 63rd in 2019. So in the 60s, net yards per play was a minus 0.62. And that's expected as, a first-year head coach. But the crazy thing about that being in the negatives, especially minus 0.6, is that they won 8 games. So it's like they had some serious luck on their side, in my opinion. Their turnover margin wasn't that lucky. It was +1, but I guess you gotta give Kleiman a lot of credit for coaching this team last year. Medium easy. They get to go to Oklahoma, but they get Texas at home. They have an easier non-conference schedule. They get to play Buffalo at home, North Dakota at home, Vanderbilt at home. Pretty easy stuff. Vanderbilt was terrible last year, if you remember. My summary here, Kansas State had a great first year, like I said, under that coach, and won those 8 games. Very impressed by that. But the biggest thing, if you remember, they beat Oklahoma. And I watched that game, and I was just so excited for those kids. They played out of their minds the first half, and they got some turnovers. Oklahoma, if they had one more quarter, they would eventually pull away and beat them. Oklahoma had this massive comeback at the end, but it wasn't quite enough time. But just from what Kansas State had, everyone was missing Schneider, their coach, and Chris Kleiman does that. He pretty much won the whole college over. So they return 5 of their 11 starters on defense. So hopefully that's helpful, but just the 2 starters on offense is going to be really tough. Even though this team won 8 games last year, I only can count 6 games this year. I think they're going to win 2 or 3 of their non-conference. Then at West Virginia is probably a loss. Texas is probably a loss. They'll win against Kansas. At TCU is probably a loss. At Iowa State's a loss. Home against Texas Tech is a toss-up. At Oklahoma's a loss. Home against Oklahoma State's a toss-up. And then at Baylor's a toss-up. So there you go. I'm about on the same board, around the 6 to 6.5 range. Actually, Vegas's number is 6.5, so I have to lean to the under. Next team, number 9 in the Big 12, West Virginia. And their power rating is 4. If you've noticed, these teams after Texas is pretty much bunched in. Kind of like I said in the beginning, but I am giving Texas another shot here to hopefully remove themselves from the pack. But I really like what West Virginia did last year. New coach, 5-7, no key transitions here. Their returning production ranked 65th or 66th. Offense was 71%, defense was 58%. Recruiting rankings, 2017 was 57th, 2018 was 35th, 2019 was 48th. So averaging around 47 those 3 years. Net yards per play, minus 0.58, pretty typical for the record. Turnover margin, -6. So this was bad, but I kind of like it. Because the team has more experience, and when this happens, teams really try to fix it the next year. That means more regression to the mean with turnovers means possibly a better team next year. I like it. Their Vegas season win total is 5.5. Their schedule is medium, and I wrote down this all depends upon their first game at Florida State. Well, it's actually going to be at the Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta, neutral field versus Florida State. Like I said, this team shocked me last year, winning 5 games. What an amazing finish at the end. Winning 2 out of their last 3. At Kansas State they won, and at TCU, and they kept up with Oklahoma State in the middle there. They only lost to Oklahoma State by 6 points. And the first-year coach, Neil Brown, did a fantastic job. He came from Troy, and I got to tell you, I was surprised they got to 5, and I can't remember if I took under 5.5 or under 5 for their win total, but I thought this one was my best, and they overachieved, similar to the Miami Dolphins last year. But either way, Jarrett Doeg took over for Austin Kendall last year, right? And so Doeg was the better quarterback, okay? So their offensive number of 71% returning production might be even higher than that. They had the worst last year and still won 5 games. On defense, they returned only 5 starters, but in all reality, 8 of them had some significant snaps last year. I think West Virginia and their first game in Atlanta versus Florida State is going to set the tone. That's what I think. I think, Florida State's been broken for so many years. West Virginia is hungry. That's going to be a fantastic game on September 5th. So I'm excited to see that. But I'm not going to have an opinion on their season win total, because if they win that game, they're going over 5.5 wins. My number is 5.5 on the dot. And for the last team in the Big 12, the poor-ass Kansas City Jayhawks power rating is -4. So, for example, West Virginia's was 4, 8-point difference between them and West Virginia here. Les Miles. Whew. You got a big uphill to climb, my man. 2019 record was 3-9. Key transitions, none. I mean, who can be key on Kansas right now? Their returning production ranks 126th in the nation Offense was 41st and defense was 44th. Recruiting rankings, 2017 ranked 71st, 2018 was 60th, and 2019 was 70th. But you remember Les Miles was hired last year before the season. So lots of work to do in climbing this uphill battle for poor Les Miles there. Shocking thing to me, their turnover margin's minus 12. So that's obviously Kansas-esque, horrible. But their yards per play on net was only minus 0.29. Minus 0.29. I was kind of shocked about that. And it just felt like they were a lot worse than that to me. And so maybe these special teams gave up a lot. I mean, they've been... Maybe some interceptions happened a lot, some pick sixes. I don't know, but I had to look twice at it. Their net yards per play only minus 0.29. So, I mean, the good thing, if they can get their turnover margin closer to zero and, play somewhat like they did last year, they could win a few games, I mean, they can. Their schedule's medium easy. Non-conference is a cakewalk. Against New Hampshire, Boston College is a little tougher, but it's at home. And then at Coastal Carolina, they should be there. Okay, there. Their Vegas win total is 3.5. Okay. Les Miles, this is the biggest challenge I had ever seen a coach that's won championships accept. Maybe I'm missing something, but going to Kansas, they haven't done anything since the 1960s. And I'm not that old. I wasn't around then, okay? I don't know what happened then, but I just know that they've never been relevant in football. I mean, with such a great basketball team, it's just weird that they didn't have some semblance. Even Duke has a semblance of a football team, and they weren't even Power 5 for a lot of years. So the thing about recruits here, and what's tough about Les Miles, is that if you're a recruit, do you go to Kansas? I mean, you're a 3-star, right? Maybe fringe 4-star. I don't know. You're not going to pick Kansas because you might want to go to like a Central Florida and win and stick out more than Kansas would, looking at being a loser on a terrible team, And so that's why Kansas can't even recruit against the best group of 5 teams. That's their problem. They got to get over that hump, and maybe Les Miles is the guy to do it. But I really don't care that they lost a lot of production here. How I said they rank 126th because they didn't really lose anybody, in my opinion. The thing that I'm going to look for is that they have a defensive-minded coach. So I guess anything's possible in the Big 12. If for some reason they start playing defense, they're going to cover a shit ton of spreads, especially if they slow down the game. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. As far as team win totals, I'm not going to go over 3.5. I only see 2 wins for sure. They could lose against Boston College at Coastal Carolina. It's slightly tricky. Coastal Carolina is actually, so far from the research I've done, is looking decent. But their power ratings, like I said, 8 points worse than the next team. So I can't even mess with them right now. But I can look towards some unders if their defense improves. And I can look at them covering the spread. So my wins are 3. So in summary, apologize that I don't have a lot of plays for you guys. I wanted to break down the conference for you. It's not like there's always this value on all these teams. I've went through previews without betting anything. I was lucky to find the 12-1 for Iowa to give that out to you. And, hopefully that comes to fruition from Iowa State. And maybe they're in it all the way till the end. We'll see. But either way, that's the show on the Big 12. If you have any questions, please tweet us at the Odds Breakers. If you like the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe. Everyone, have a fantastic weekend, and remember to have some fun and go get some winners.